So all of you clear? See, are you following me? What I'm explaining here? See how QTP, what we discussed till in the last session, how QTP identifies. What is the process of identification of any object during the QTP script execution? First step, QTP will fetch the description, object description from the repository file. After that, it will search for an object which is matching with this description. Suppose if the description cannot identify object, that means there is no object matching with this description, then and smart identification is enabled, then QTP will use smart identification properties after 20 seconds to identify that object, to identify object. Correct? Suppose if the smart identification is not enabled, then what QTP will do? Description cannot identify the object and smart identification is not enabled. Then what will happen? It will throw error. Is it right? Or it will throw error, or no, it won't throw error. That also, then also. See that? If the description cannot identify object and smart identification is enabled, if the description or smart identification properties cannot identify object, then QTP will use ordinal identifier if it is captured, if it is available to identify an object. Now let us see that these are the 4 steps involved in the object identification. In the first step, QTP will fetch the description from the repository file. After that, it will search for an object which is matching with this description. If that object is not found by using the description and a smart identification is enabled, and smart identification is enabled, then QTP will use smart identification properties. When it will use smart identification properties? After 20 seconds. Understand? Again, by using this smart identification properties, we are not sure. It is not 100% sure. Sometimes still that object cannot be identified by using even smart identification properties. By using smart identification properties also, sometimes object may not be identified. That might be happen. Most of the times by using smart identification, that object can be identified most of the times, but in worst scenario sometimes still that object cannot be identified even after using smart identification properties. That means in the third step also that object may not be identified still. So in that case, QTP will come to 4th step. See, this third step, when QTP will use this third step, only if the smart identification is enabled, only then QTP will use this third step. Suppose if the smart identification is not enabled, then QTP will come directly 4th step. It will go directly 4th step. What is that 4th step? That is the final option the QTP has to identify an object. What is that final option? By using ordinal identifier. Ordinal identifier means location, index, creation time. These are the ordinal identifier. If that ordinal identifier is captured in the repository file, only then QTP can use this ordinal identifier option. If it is not already captured in the repository file, then QTP cannot use ordinal identifier option as well. Understand the point? First step, it will use description. If this description is failed, then it will go with smart identification properties. When it can go with smart identification properties, if the smart identification is enabled for that object, only then QTP can use smart identification properties to identify that object. In case if this smart identification properties also cannot identify an object, or if the smart identification is not enabled for that object, in both the cases, QTP will use fourth option. What is that fourth one? QTP finally will try to identify that object by using ordinal identifier if it is captured in the repository file. If this ordinal identifier is not captured in the repository file, QTP cannot use this option at runtime. See that here in the above snapshot, ordinal identifier is none. That means for this cancel button, ordinal identifier is not captured. So QTP cannot use this fourth option for identifying this cancel button, because ordinal identifier is not captured here in the repository file for this cancel button. Only smart identification is enabled and description is available. So how many steps QTP can use here to identify cancel button? Only first three steps can be used here. Fourth step cannot be used because there is no ordinal identifier defined here for this cancel button. Only description and smart identification is available. No ordinal identifier is available. Are you clear? So it cannot use this option. You have any doubt, guys, in object identification process before moving to the next step, the next concept? Please ask me if you have any queries or any doubts in the object identification, or in object configuration, or in object learning process, or in object recording process. So these are all the concepts, core concepts, what we discussed so far. Okay. If you have any questions or queries, right, please let me know. Before moving to next concept, we can discuss one more time if you want. If you don't have any queries, then we can proceed to next concept. Right, you are right. You are right, Shiva. See, if there is no smart identification, that means if the smart identification is enabled, and also if there is no ordinal identifier captured in the repository file, then what a QTP will do? Here, see. See, there are different possibilities here. See, sometimes no smart identification is enabled and no ordinal identifier is available. Then you will be getting error whenever description is failed to identify that object. If description cannot identify the object and no smart identification and no ordinal identifier defined for that object, in that case what QTP will do? As soon as the description is not able to identify the object, it can wait up to 20 seconds, and after 20 seconds it will throw error, because there is no other alternative option for QTP to identify that object, because smart identification is not enabled and ordinal identifier is not defined. See, the smart identification and ordinal identifier, these are all alternative options for QTP to identify any object. The primary option is description. The primary option for QTP to identify any object is object description. Object description means this one for the first part in the above snapshot. See, description. These two properties are defined inside the description. See, ordinal identifier is a separate one, and similarly smart identification is a separate one. Understand? So smart identification and ordinal identifier, these two are alternative options. The primary option to identify any object in QTP is object description. If object description is failed to identify any object, then QTP will look for other alternatives. What is the first alternative? Smart identification. If the smart identification is enabled, then QTP will use that option. Suppose if the smart identification is not enabled, then it will look for ordinal identifier. Is there any ordinal identifier is defined in the repository file? If ordinal identifier is available, then it will use that ordinal identifier property to identify that object. Suppose if these two alternative options are not available for that object, that means there is no smart identification and there is no ordinal identifier defined in the repository file, then QTP will be having only one option, that is object description. If this object description is failed to identify that object, immediately QTP will throw error because there is no other option to try to identify that object. So it has only one option. If that option is failed, QTP will throw error. Yeah, just a second. Okay, all of you clear? Shiva, clear now the process? Yeah, okay. Okay, any other queries or any doubts, you can please ping me before. If you don't have, let us go to the next concept. And this concept virtual relation identifier will be is available only in QTP 12 or in QTP 11, and here we don't have that option. One second. Okay, this option virtual relation identification. What is this virtual relation identification? I will show you this one with using QTP UFT 12. I will show you this one. Okay, later we'll discuss this concept virtual relation identification. What is this? And in UFT 12 we have two more options. Two more options are available that we'll see that. Okay, and now today I'm going to directly object repositories concept. Object repositories. Okay, Jerry. So now let us start with the object repositories concept. See, we already discussed about object repositories while discussing where we discussed about object repositories. In which concept we discussed about object repository? Here, right? In the recording process. What QTP is doing at the time of recording? It saves that object details, description and name in the repository file. See, at the time of recording, what QTP is doing? First, it will capture description and it assigns a name to that object, and it will saves this object description and object name data in one file. That file is called repository file. That means in object repository file, what is object repository file? It is something storage where you can store objects description and objects names. That means objects with which the QTP should work. So those objects, descriptions and names will be saved in one file. That file is called object repository file. Is it right? See, what is the QTP script? What is there inside QTP script? Inside QTP script, there can be multiple actions. In one QTP script can contain multiple actions. What is the action? What is the action? Action means, so I will go to new document. Yeah. So we are talking about object repository. Yeah. Object repository. See, before discussing about object repository, first we have to understand The QTP script. What is a QTP script? QTP script is a collection of actions. Collection of actions. Actions means here say by default in every QTP script there would be one action. Action 1. Correct. So by default every QTP script or every QTP test script contains one action. What is that action name? Action 1. Are you clear? So what is a QTP test script actually? It is nothing but a collection of actions, collection of multiple actions. So by default in every QTP test script, there should be one action, that is action 1. We can add more actions to the QTP script if you want. So inside action, what we are defining? What is the action? What is a QTP action? What is a QTP action? QTP action is nothing but what is a QTP test script and what is a QTP action. So QTP action is nothing but it is a collection of steps. Inside action, we can define multiple steps. We can write a code for multiple steps inside the action. So inside the action, what we are automating? We are automating the test case steps, right? We are writing the code for test case steps inside the action. Are you clear? So action is it is a QTP component. QTP action is a QTP component. It is QTP component. It is a QTP component action, QTP action. It is nothing but it is a collection of steps. Action is nothing but collection of steps. The QTP test is nothing but collection of actions. Are you clear? So whenever we create an action, so with every QTP action, there is one file and there is one data sheet associated. With every QTP action, there is one repository file and a data sheet. Will be associated with every action by default. With every action, there would be one repository file and one data sheet. One data sheet will be associated with every action by default. So the repository file, this repository file which is associated by default with an action is called local repository file. Are you clear? The repository file by default associated with an action by default is called local repository file, local object repository file. The repository file which is associated with an action by default is called local repository file. So when we record any action in the application, see, when you record an object, say for example, here I'm recording something, I'm clicking record button, I click record button and do something, I'm clicking OK, I got again click OK. I recorded two actions. See what is happening at the time of recording? Automatically QTP captures those objects what we recorded into the repository file. Which repository file that is? Local repository file. Are you clear? That means while recording, where objects will be added? While recording, objects will be added to local repository file while recording the script. While recording, in the script. While recording the script, objects will be added to local repository file. So whenever you record any action in the application, QTP will add those objects by default in the local repository file. So where you can see that local repository file, we can view or edit local repository objects in object repository tool, where we can how you can edit or where you can see objects in the local repository file, how you can view or edit the local repository file by using object repository tool. So in QTP I recorded here two actions, so automatically this login dialog box, OK button, and a flight reservations dialog box and OK button inside this dialog box, all these objects are added by default in the local repository. So where you can see that local repository and where you can modify that local repository by using object repository tool, go to the resources and here you can select here object repository tool. This is object repository tool. So in this object repository tool, we can view or edit local object repository files. See, there is a drop down here, action drop down. This drop down displays all the actions in the script. In the script, how many actions are available, all those actions will be listed here. So currently there is only one action in the QTP script. So only one action name is displayed here. So action 1 is selected here. That means now it is displaying here in the object repository tool action 1 local repository file. Now object repository tool, which repository file is displayed? Action 1 local repository file is displayed now. Understand? Suppose if I add one more action, say I will add one more action to this QTP script. How I'm adding? Go to insert, call to new action. Call to new action. To add one more new action to the script, we should select this option. In the insert menu, select call to new action. See, you can give that action name whatever you want, action 2, and simply click OK. We'll discuss this one later about actions, how to add new actions, different types of actions, that we'll discuss. That is our next concept. So I don't want to go in detail about the actions. Here I have added one more action, action 2, into the script. So now in the script there are two actions, action 1 and action 2. See, by default with every action there would be one repository file that is called local repository file. Are you clear? Now in action 1 we have recorded two actions. Is it right? While recording these two actions, a few objects are added by default into the local repository file. But in action 2, there is no code available. Is it right? It is empty. That means this action 2 local repository file should be empty. Are you clear? In action 1 local repository file, these objects should be added. Login dialog box, OK button, flight reservations dialog box, OK button. These objects are added in action 1 local repository, not in action 2 local repository. Since there are two different actions, there are two different local repositories will be available. For action 1, one local repository file. For action 2, another local repository file will be available. Is it right? So whatever the objects that you have recorded in action 1, those objects will be added into action 1 local repository file. Understand? So now open that object repository tool. Now look at that here in actions drop down, it displays two action names. If I select action 1, now it displays action 1 local repository objects. See here, login dialog box, flight reservations. Inside flight reservations again OK button is there. This OK button is inside this login dialog box. This OK button is inside login dialog. Are you clear? If I select here action 2, look at that here. It is empty. There is no object available inside action 2 local repository file. It is empty. Understand? So any action local repository file you can edit or you can view in object repository tool. And one more important point here. See, in action 1, we have some objects. Are you clear? Can we create a script in action 2 by using these objects, by using action 1 local repository file? Are you getting my point? We have action 1 local repository file. By using action 1 local repository file, can we create a script in action 2? Can we run the script in action 2? We cannot create it. Say for example, if I copy the same code in action 2, I'm copying the same code in action 2. Are you clear? See that what I'm doing? Okay, first let me run this action 1, then we can understand clearly. See, there is action 1. Inside this action 1, there are 2 steps. To run these 2 steps, we need objects. Those objects are already added in action 1 local repository file. And in action 2 is there one more action in QTP script. That action 2 is empty. And action 2 local repository also empty. Are you clear now? Now, if I run this script, what will happen? If I'm running this script. See, the QTP script will run all the actions inside that script. Whenever you run the QTP script, what will happen? It will execute all actions in that QTP script. See, look at that result file. Action 1 executed. Action 2 also executed. But in action 2, there is no step to run. So nothing is executed inside action 2. But in action 1, there are 2 steps. So let us see those 2 steps. See that login. Inside login dialog box, we are clicking OK button. Then it displays another pop-up dialog box. And inside that pop-up dialog box, we are clicking again OK button. So these 2 steps are executed in action 1. But in action 2, there is no steps. So nothing is executed. Now what I will do, I will copy action 1 code in action 2. I'm copying here in action 2. Now, if I run the script, let us see what happens. What is happening? While running the action 2, we are getting error. While running the action 2 script, we are getting error. What is this error? The login object was not found in the object repository file. That is the error message displayed in the dialog box, in the error message dialog box. The login dialog box, see that the first parent object in this statement. What is the first parent object in this statement? Login dialog. So this login dialog box was not found in the object repository file. Object repository file means which object repository here? It is referring? It refers here action to local repository. It refers here action to local repository. That means whenever QTP is running action 2, while running this action 2 code, where QTP is searching for this object? QTP is searching for this object in action 2 local repository. The action 2 local repository is empty. There is no object available. So this object is not found in action 2 local repository. That is the error it is throwing. Understand the point here. Similarly, when QTP is running action 1, while running this action 1 code, where QTP will search for this object. For this object, QTP will search action 1 local repository. If this object is found in the action 1 local repository, then it will execute that object. So these 2 steps are executed successfully because these objects are available inside action 1 local repository file. Say that here. In action 1 local repository, these objects are available. But in action 2, there is no object available. So that is the error we are getting while running this action 2 script. So from this, what we understand? Action 1 local repository objects cannot be used in action 2. Same, action 2 local repository objects we can't use in action 1. So every local repository objects are local to that action. Action 1 local repository objects can be used only in action 1. Action 2 local repository objects can be used only in action 2. Are you clear at this point? Okay. So the local repository objects can be used only within the local action. Within the local action. That means, what is that means? Action 1 local repository objects can be used only in action 1. Only in action 1 we can use action 1 local repository objects. Similarly, action 2 local repository file objects can be used only in action 2. Are you clear? Action 2 local repository objects can be used only inside action 2. It is not possible to use action 1 local repository objects in any other action. Are you clear? Except in action 1. In action 1. That means what we can understand here, what type of relation is there between action and local repository file? So it is a one-to-one relation. It is one-to-one relation between QTP action and local repository files. Are you clear now? What is a local repository file? What is a local repository file? Local repository file is nothing but it is a default repository. It is a default repository file for every action. With every action, there is one default repository file that is called local repository. When you record any action, by default objects will be added to the local repository files. And these local repository objects cannot be used in any other actions. Only within its local action, those objects can be used. Understand? If you want to run action 1 code, only you can use action 1 local repository file. We can't use any other actions local repository files. Are you clear? So this is called, suppose in one QTP script, if I have 10 actions, there should be 10 local repositories. See, these local repository files we don't use in the real-time projects. See, local repository files will be created when these local repository files will be created automatically at the time of creating action. See, we are not creating the local repository file. That local repository file will be created automatically. And when this local repository, where this local repository will be saved, the local repository file will be saved inside action folder. Are you clear? Will be saved automatically. While saving the QTP script. while saving the QTB script. Inside action folder. Are you clear these 2 points? The local repository file will be created automatically. We are not creating that. It will be created automatically at the time of creating an action. And similarly, the local repository file, we no need to save it. We no need to save that local repository file. If you want, you can add objects to local repository file manually or at the time of recording. But we no need to save that file. It will be automatically saved at the time of saving your QTP script. Where it will be saved? Inside action folder. Inside that action folder, it will save that local repository file. See that? See, to this local repository file, how we are adding objects? Adding objects to local repository file. See, what are the manipulations we can do inside this object repository tool? Object repository tool. What we can execute inside this object repository tool? The first thing, add objects. Adding objects to local repository file. What is the use of object repository tool? It is used to view or edit local object repository files. To view, edit local object repository files, and to view all associated shared object repositories. What is the use of object repository tool? By using this object repository tool, we can view or edit local object repository files. And what we can do, how to add objects into local repository file. See what we can do inside this object repository tool. If you go to this object repository tool, action 1, see these are the objects added automatically into this repository file while recording the script. That means how objects can be added into the local repository file. Adding objects to local repository file. Add objects to local repository file. How it can add it? By recording. By recording the script, automatically objects will be added into this local repository file. So these objects are added by recording. And what are the other options we can do? We can add manually, add objects manually using object repository tool. That means open object repository tool, then you click this add object button, then select the object in the application. Click this button, add objects to local, or you go to object menu and select this option, add objects to local. Now select the object, what object you want to add in the application. So I want to add this text box to my local repository file. So we have to click on this text box, not on this label. This is a label for this text box. I don't want to add this label object. I want to add this text box object to my repository file, local repository file. So we have to click on this text box. Click on this text box. Now it will display the selected object hierarchy in the application. What is the hierarchy? Objects hierarchy of the selected object in the application. So this is the object I selected. This object is inside login dialog box. Yes, this is the object I want to add into the repository file. Click OK. See, now that is added. And similarly, click again. Select password. Added. Like this, we can add objects one by one. Whatever the objects that you want to automate. So those objects can be added one by one to the repository file by adding one by one by using add object to local option in the object repository tool. So this is the second way. The first option is by recording. At the time of recording, Objects will be added to local repository file by default. That is one option. Another option, we can add objects to local repository file manually using object repository tool. What we are doing inside object repository tool, we have to click this button and select the object in the application. Then that object will be added into the local repository file. This is one option. And we have one more option, third option, from active screen. From active screen also we can add objects to local repository file. What is the active screen? Active screen is nothing but it is a panel. It displays the recorded step snapshot. It displays the snapshot of the current step. See that, for example, here we recorded these two steps in action 1. Go to action 1 here. These two steps are recorded. Is it right? When you record any action, automatically QTP captures a snapshot for every step. And where you can view those snapshots? In active screen panel. Go to view menu, select here active screen. It is already selected, so just have to drag and drop this little. See, this is active screen panel. So this active screen panel displays the snapshot of the current step in QTP. Just you place the cursor on any step. Here I am placing the cursor on this step. See, for this step, this is the snapshot. Are you clear? So from this active screen, this is called active screen. From this active screen, it is possible to add objects into local repository without application. See that, without application, we can add objects to local repository file from the active screen in QTP. See, this is a snapshot. Simply, active screen is nothing but a snapshot. Suppose even now application is not available. Currently application is down. I want to make some changes in my script. Okay, I want to add cancel button to my repository file, and I want to add here a cancel button. I want to click that step. I want to add here to this script. But at present application is down. I want to add here. I want to add a step to click cancel button in the login dialog box. Assume that the login dialog box is not launching now, application is down. Then how we can do that? Still, if you have active screen, if active screen is available for these steps, active screen is available. So from this active screen, we can add object into the local repository, and by using that object, we can add a code very easily. Now let us see that. Click this. This is the object repository tool. Now look at that here. There is no cancel button available inside login dialog box. Cancel button is not already added into this local repository. Now I want to add cancel button from the active screen. Let us see that how it is. Simply right click on the object in the active screen. Which object you want to add? I want to add this cancel button. See, I am not using application now. See, if I use this option, what option? Object repository and add object option, application should be available. You can add object into the repository file from the application by using this option. What option? Add object option. Add object option we can use to add object into local repository file from the application. So application should be available. Only then we can use this option, add object to local option. Suppose application is not available, but you have active screen. That means application snapshot is captured in the QTP. That is called active screen. Is it right? So this is the snapshot of login screen. That snapshot of login screen is available in QTP. So from this snapshot, we can add object into local repository. Right click on this object in the active screen and view or add object. Select this option. When I select this option, this is the object. What object you selected in the snapshot? I selected cancel button. See, that is highlighted here. I selected cancel button inside dialog box. Yes, click OK. These are the properties of cancel button. Yes, I want to add this description in the repository file. So add this description to repository file with the name cancel. See that name also automatically displayed here. Click this button, add to repository. That's it. Done. The cancel button is added to repository file. Now, if you go and check that repository file, see that cancel is added and see that it will highlight it. That object is successfully highlighting. So we can highlight actual object in the application by clicking this button. Highlight in the application. You can highlight any object. We can cross check whether this description, that means this description should identify that object, actual object in the application, and that actual object will be highlighted by clicking this button, cancel. So it is highlighting the cancel button. That means this description is identifying that cancel button successfully without any issues. So like this, we can add objects into local repository file from the active screen also. And we have one more option to add objects into local repository file. That is, we can add object manually. Add objects manually. So here I will remove this manual word. Okay. We can add objects manually. Manually in the sense without, see in these three cases, how objects descriptions and names are captured in the repository file automatically. Are you clear? In all these three options, while recording, automatically QTP captures object descriptions names into repository file. Same thing is happening when you click this add object option. Are you clear? See, when I click this add object option and when you add something, these object properties will be automatically captured here. We are not doing anything. QTP automatically captures the selected object description. We are nothing defining manually. Are you clear? That's what happening in all three cases. In the same way, from active screen also, we have not defined any description manually. Is it right? It automatically captures the object description into the repository file by using all these three options. But by using this manual option, how to define that? When we use this manual option, see when this is very useful. When this is useful, this option, if application is not available, that means down. Let us assume that it is down. Available and application snapshot is available. Application snapshot is available in QTP. Then we can use this option to add objects into local repository file. Are you clear? And this is a default option we use always. It is a default option we use always to add objects. Are you clear? And recording option, we don't use this recording option generally in the real-time projects unless it is mandatory. See, for few steps it is mandatory to record. We cannot write a code for few steps. Example, like digital signature. I want to automate my digital signature. We cannot write a code for that. We should have to record that step. Like that, there could be some actions very rarely which should be recorded. Only then we use recording in the real-time project. Otherwise, we don't use this recording. Who will be using this recording? Learners or beginners. Beginners who are new to QTP or who are learners who are learning the QTP. At the time, this option will be useful. Are you clear? And when we use this manual option to create script before application is available for testing, that means that is called early automation. Early automation means even before application is available for testing, we can start automation development. That means without application available, without our application is available, we can add object to local repository file by using this option, manual option. To add, I can say that to add object to local repository without before application is available. Before application is available. It is called early automation. Early automation. Are you clear? So now let us see that we have seen already these three options. Now let us see this, how we can define an object, how we can add object to local repository file without application. Say that I will go to that local repository file. For example, I remove this OK button. I am removing here OK button. Now I want to add OK button into this repository file. Even I don't know what is the what application is not available, but I know that what fields are available in the login dialog box. Inside login dialog box, we know that the login dialog box layout. Here there is some agent name and here password text box and OK button, cancel button, help button. These are the fields will be available in the login dialog box. But that login application is not yet available. Really it is not available. But we know the layout of the screen. How that screen, what fields will be available in that screen. So before that application is ready for testing, I want to generate my automation script. Then how we can do that? So here we have one option for that. In object menu, go to define new test object option. Select this option. Define new test object. And here you choose what type of object you want to define. Windows object. Select here first environment, Windows environment. And I want to add here, see first select here, one second. I want to add OK button inside login dialog box. So you first select here login dialog box. Because I want to add OK button under this login dialog box, first select here login dialog box. And after that, select this option. Define a new test object. And select here standard Windows. And select here what type of object you want to add. Button object, Win button. What is the object name? OK. Then what is the text for that OK button? OK. What is the native class? Button. See here, I am defining here object name manually and I am defining here object description also manually. This description is not capturing automatically. We are defining object description and object name manually. And now click add button. See that OK button is added inside this login dialog box with the description what I defined here. The description is saved here and same name is saved here. Are you understanding how we added OK button without using application and without using active screen snapshot? So like this it is possible to add objects to the local repository file by using manually without any application available, or even though without application is not available, still we can be able to add objects to local repository file by using this option. Okay, so all these four options just only right for knowing purpose. I am explaining, I'm showing all those things, but in the real time even we don't use local repository concept itself in the real time project. Then why they keep this local repository concept in QTP if you are not using in the real-time project? Then what is the use of local repository? What are the benefits of local repository? Benefits are very simple. It is very easy to use local repositories for beginners, because the local repositories will be automatically created and will be automatically saved. We have nothing to do. If I am recording my script, this local repository will be automatically created. We have nothing to do. If you are recording my script, is it right? If I record the script, automatically it will generate the script. See that. For example, I'm recording my login test case. Simply enter Prasad Mercury and click OK. That's it. I recorded my script, and for this script, whatever the repository is required, that repository file is automatically created as a local repository file. See, it is already created. So it is very easy for beginners or learners to work with local repository files, because the local repository file will be automatically created and automatically saved. That is the main benefit. Okay. So another benefit is it will be automatically created and saved. And saved. We have nothing to do. Are you clear? These are the two benefits we can say by using local repository. Then why we don't use this local repository in the real-time projects? Disadvantages. What are the disadvantages of local repository? Disadvantages. See, for example, let us assume that I can explain you in this PPT. One second. Yeah, let us see here. How local repository works. This is the local repository structure. It is action 1, local repository 1, action 2, local repository 2, action 3, local repository 3. So with every action, there is one local repository file. It is one-to-one relation. Let us assume that in action 1, I am writing a script for first 5 screens in my application. First 5 screens are automated in action 1. And in action 2, I have automated screens 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Understand? That means, see here, like this I have done. How I can say you? Here I can show you. Okay. Let us assume that here, just I'm dropping here one more small thing. See, in action 1, I covered screen numbers I'm giving here. 1 to 5. 1 to 5 screens are automated here in action 1. In action 2, we have automated screens 3 to 8. 3 to 8 screens. These are the screens are covered in action 2 in my application. And here we have automated 5 to 10. 5 to 10 screens. These are the screens are covered. Are you clear? In action 1, we have screen 1, screen 2, screen 3, screen 4, screen 5. These are the 5 screens flow will be executed in this test case. In action 2 code will execute screens 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 screens. These are the screens action 2 will run. Action 3 will execute 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 screens. Are you clear? That means when you are creating a script for screens 1 to 5, in screen 1 you may have 5 objects, screen 2 in 5 objects, screen 3 5 objects. Like that, in each screen there are 5 objects. Let us assume that. Now how many screens are there, and total how many objects are there inside this local repository? Total 5 screens, and in each screen 5 objects. So total number of objects 5 into 5, 25 objects. Correct? Are you clear? So when you come to this screen action 2, this action 2 is we are automating starting from screen 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. In action 1, we already covered screens 2, 3, 4, 5, right? Here we already covered 3, 4, 5. Again in action 2, same screens are repeating. Understand? That means again in action 2, we are executing screen 3, 4, 5 and some new screens. 6, 7, 8. 3, 4, 5 screens are old screens already covered in action 1. That means 3, 4, 5 screen objects already added in the local repository file. But again, when you are automating same screens 3, 4, 5 in action 2, again we should add this screen 3, 4, 5 objects in local repository 2 also. Understand my point here? So this local repository contains objects from screen 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. This local repository contains objects from screens 1 to 5. Similarly, this local repository 3 contains objects from screens 5 to 10. So what we understand here? Now tell me, suppose tomorrow in the next release, when you are running these 3 actions, in that release, new release, there is a change in screen number 5. There is some object modifications are done by the developer in screen 5. They have modified few object properties in screen 5. Then where we have to update the screen 5 objects, in which repository file we have to update the screen 5 objects now in this scenario. In this scenario, in which repository file we have to update the screen 5 objects? In local repository 1? Yes, because there is a screen 5 objects here inside local repository 1. So the local repository 1 should be updated. Local repository 2? Yes, because the local repository 2 also there is a screen 5 objects. There are screen 5 objects available in local repository 2 as well. Same objects are available here, are added here. So we have to update local repository 1 and local repository 2. Both the repositories we have to update. And screen repository 3 as well, because the local repository 3 also contains screen 5 objects. That means the screen 5 objects are added in 3 local repositories. So tomorrow, if there is any changes in the screen 5 objects, we should have to update all 3 repository files. Otherwise, suppose if I update only in local repository 1, and if I don't update local repository 2 and 3, what happens? Action 2 and action 3 will be failed, because these 2 repositories contains old properties of screen 5, old objects of screen 5. So definitely this script will fail. Screen 5 cannot be identified in action 2 and action 3, because these 2 repositories contains old screen 5 properties, objects and properties. Understand? That means if there is any changes in the application UI, then you might have to update multiple local repositories. See, for example, in screen 5, only one object is modified by the developer. Developer has modified only one object in the screen 5. But that one modification, because of that one object modification, you may have to modify 3 local repositories or more than 3 local repositories. That means that screen 5 might be used in multiple local repositories. It is possible. Understand? That means what we understand here, if you use local repositories, the duplicate objects will be created among the local repositories. Why duplicate objects will be created? See, in action 1, I have automated one test case. The test case covers screens 1 to 5. But action 2 covers another test case. That test case navigates through screens 3 to 8. I have automated one more test case in action 3. This test case navigates through screens 5 to 10. See, these 3 actions, in these 3 actions, there are some screens are common. Understand? So whenever screens are common, definitely that screen objects should be added in every action local repository file. Because if the screen 5 is added in local repository 1, this local repository 1 cannot be used in action 2. Similarly, this local repository 1 cannot be used in action 3. It is not possible because local repository objects cannot be used in other actions. It is not possible. So because of that, even though you have added the screen5 objects in local repository 1, again we should add same objects in local repository 2 also, in local repository 3 also, because this action 2 will be running screen5. So that object should be added here. Similarly, action 3 also running screen5. So that screen5 object should be added in local repository 3 as well. So automatically duplication of objects will be created among the local repositories. So when there are more duplication of objects created, what is the challenge here? If there is any one object properties are modified in the application by the developer, then you have to update many local repository files, which is very difficult, which is very difficult to find out in which repositories this object is used. We have to search that all the repository files and then we have to modify one by one. It is really a tedious process. So this is the main disadvantage. The first disadvantage is duplication of objects. See, first thing is the local repository objects cannot be used in other actions. That is the first main disadvantage in other actions. Because of this, what will happen? Duplication of objects, duplicate objects will be created among the local repositories, in local repositories, not among the, I can say, in local repositories. When duplicate objects are created, what is the problem? Multiple local repository files should be updated for even very minor, for minor changes, for minor UI changes, for minor UI changes in the application. So this is what, this is called maintenance. That means local repositories maintenance is very difficult. That is the main point. Repositories maintenance is very difficult in big projects. If project is very small, then it is fine, you can go with local repositories. If the project is very big project, then definitely it is very difficult to maintain the local repositories. Are you clear? So because of these reasons, we don't use local repository files in the real-time projects. All of you clear? What is a local repository file? What is the object repository? First we discussed what is a QTP script and what is a QTP action and what is the object repository file. What is object repository file definition? I can say repository file, it is a file where object descriptions and names will be stored. Object repository is a file in QTP where we can save object descriptions and object names. Are you clear? See, there is one local repository file associated. So these object repositories are two types, I can say broadly. One is local and another one is shared repository. See, now here we discussed about local repository file. Are you clear, guys? The local repository file, the repository file associated with an action by default is called local repository. That is the first point. And objects will be added to local repository file while recording the script. Automatically, objects will be added by default into by recording. This step is already added below. We can view or edit the local repository objects in Object Repository tool, where you can view the local repository file inside Object Repository tool. The local repository objects can be used only within the local action. It is important. The local repository objects can be used only within the local action. That means, see here example is given. That means action 1 local repository objects can be used only in action 1. Similarly, action 2 local repository objects can be used only in action 2. It is not possible to use action 1 local repository objects in any other action except in action 1. The relationship between QTP actions and local repository files is one-to-one relation. That means for every action, there should be one local repository file. That is the meaning of that one-to-one relation. Are you clear? Next one, local repository files will be created automatically at the time of creating action. How to create local repository files? Create. How to create local repository file. And how to save the local repository file. Where it will be saved. The local repository file will be saved inside action folder, and it will be saved automatically at the time of saving the QTP script. Clear? And where we can edit, view or edit object repository file. We can view or edit the object repository file in Object Repository tool using Object Repository tool. Object Repository tool. Tool is used to view or edit the local repository files and to view all other associated shared object repositories. All other associated shared object repositories. Now see how to add object to local repository. There are different options that we can use to add objects into local repository file by recording. At the time of recording, automatically objects will be added into local repository file. Who will be using this? Beginners or learners. This option is good for learners. This option is good for beginners or learners. Are you clear? And add object using Object Repository tool. Using Object Repository tool, we can add objects into the local repository file. It is a default option that we use normally. By using this option, we will be adding objects into local repository file one by one. And from active screen, we can add objects into local repository file from active screen. Active screen means snapshot, by using the application snapshot in the active screen. If application is not available, and if you want to add some objects into repository file, it is possible by using snapshots of the application in the active screen. And manually, even before application is available for automation or testing, we can start automation development. We can start repository creation by using this option. Here what we do, we define object description and object name manually here. What will happen here? In this approach, object name, see object name and description will be defined manually. We define manually what is our name, what is the description, what property you want to use, what is the value of that property. Everything will be defined manually. But here in these three options, object descriptions and object names will be captured automatically by QTP. We don't define the object name and we don't define the description in these three options. But here we can define manually what is the object name, what is the object description, everything we can define manually, and we can add that object to repository file. Okay, benefits of local repository. It is very easy to use local repositories for beginners. It will be automatically created and saved, so it will be more easy to work with this local repositories. Disadvantages: local repository objects cannot be used in other actions. That is the main disadvantage. Because of this, duplicate objects will be created in local repositories. Because of the duplicate objects, it is very difficult maintenance. That means even for any small change in the application UI, you may have to update multiple local repository files, even for minor changes in the UI. So that's why, because of this, all these reasons, the local repositories maintenance is very difficult in big projects. So we don't use this in the big projects. Okay, any doubts here in the local repository concepts? Shiva, Subbarao, Chari, are you following me? What I explained here? Are you able to understand? You have any confusion? Okay, okay, good. Okay, fine. See, now this concept is not that much important. Just we should know these concepts because we don't use it in real time. Again, I'm repeating that point. Okay, because we don't use the local repository concepts in the real time project. So just you have to know these concepts. Maybe will be useful in entry point of view. The points what we discussed and what I documented here are good important points. Maybe in entry point of view. Okay. Now let us see in this object repository tool what we can do inside that object repository tool. See, here I have discussed a few points. See, what are the different types of manipulations that we can do in object repository tool. About object repository tool, let us try to learn something more concepts. Let us see that what is there inside object repository tool. Object repository tool. What is there inside? What we can do inside that? Go to object repository. See here. In object repository tool, we can do some manipulations. What are the manipulations we can do here? First thing is object rename. We can rename the object. Or shall we take some 5 minutes break and then we'll continue, guys? Okay. Just let me take for some 10 minutes break. We'll join back at 4:50 and we'll continue the session. Okay, before getting into object repository tool. Yeah. So 4:50 I will join back. Okay. Bye. Hi all, everybody is back. Chari. Hello. Hi, everybody is there. Shiva. Hello. We start recording. Yeah. Okay, guys. Now let us continue, and let us see the different types of manipulations what we can do inside object repository tool. Go to this is object repository tool. So what we can do in this object repository tool, the first one is object rename. We can modify object names in the in the local repository file. So say for example, say OK is the name, right? OK is the button name in the script also, but OK in the repository file also OK. Is it right? Now if I change this OK name, I can modify this OK name. See, actually, when you are adding objects in the object repository file, we should have to follow some naming standards in the real-time projects. We will follow some naming standards for all object names. So as per that naming standards, we should have to modify the object name. That means first thing, object name should be meaningful. So we have to keep in mind these 2 points when you are adding the objects in the repository file. See, the object name should be meaningful. That means I can say, one second, I can say standards, naming standards, object naming standards, object name naming standards, standards or guidelines, I can say. Okay, guidelines. See, in the real-time project, whenever you are adding object into repository file, we should keep in mind these points. The first point is object name should be meaning meaningful and understandable, and easy to understand, and easy to understand. And one more thing, maximum don't use blank spaces in object name, in object name and object name and add 1 to 3 letters prefix to object name. One more thing, object name should begin with capital letter, capital letter. So these are the some guidelines that we should keep in mind whenever you are adding object into a repository file. So as per this naming standards and guidelines, that object name should be modified in the repository file. See that what is that standards? See here, login. So I think so these 3 points are easy to understand, right? Object name should be meaningful and easy to understand, and don't use blank spaces in object name, and should begin with a capital letter. These are all normal guidelines. And what is this prefix? 1 to 3 characters prefix. All should be small letters. Prefix with the small case letters, lower case letters. Generally we use here lower case letters. So what is this prefix is all about? So the prefix defines that object type, what type of object it is. To identify easily what is that object is, by looking that object name in the script, in the code, we should be able to understand what type of object it is. So that object type will be defined as a prefix, will be added as a prefix to the object name. The object type should be added as a prefix. Three letters prefix, 3 letters, add object type, I can say like this, add object type as 1 to 3 letters prefix to object name. So what prefixes should be used generally in the real-time projects like this? See, for example, window is there, window. For window, prefix is WND like this. And dialog box, the prefix should be DLG. For text box, the prefix is TXT. See, the prefix can be different project to project. So whatever the prefix that you want to follow, you want to use, that should be defined before starting the project. Understand? And all the team members in the project should follow same standards. Are you clear? And a drop down box, DDL. Okay, checkbox. Hmm. What's known? Yeah, 1 minute, guys. I will join you back in 5 minutes. Just I have join back in 5 minutes. Okay. Yeah. So checkbox, radio button, RDB. If it is a browser, BRW. If it is a web page, PGE. Okay, link, LNK, image, IMG. So like this, we have to define some prefixes, and this prefix should be added before that object name. See, for example, here. Uh, Hi guys, everybody is there, right? Hello? Yeah, okay. So here I'm just changing this name by adding a prefix. As per the naming standards, I'm changing this. Dialog means DLG and add underscore. Underscore is not a mandatory. That's all how you want to define the object name. You may use underscore or you may not use underscore directly. Directly you can define DLG login like that also. And OK. OK is a button. So BTN button. And agent name is a text box. So TXT underscore. And remove the blank spaces. And if any special characters, we can remove that. Agent name and password txt underscore, remove that password. So like this, right, we can modify object names as per the naming standards, naming guidelines that we follow in the automation projects, in the real-time projects. Always we should define the object names like this. And that is the first thing. We can rename the object. We can modify the object name in object repository tool. And if you modify the object name in the local repository file, now look at that script. In the script, automatically that modified object name will be updated in the script automatically. See, whatever the name that you modify in the local repository file, that updated name will be automatically here modified in the script as well. So TLG login, TXT is name, TXT password, button OK. See, these are all automatically updated in the script. So if you modify object name in the repository, it will be automatically reflected in the script. Are you clear? That is a one point. That is about object renaming. And what else we can do in object repository tool? We can see that right click, we can copy and we can cut and we can paste it. That means we can copy and paste the objects. See, for example, if I copy this copy and paste it directly inside test objects, see that button is copied here as a separate object, not inside the dialog box. So like this, we can copy and paste the objects either inside the same repository file or inside another repository file. See, for example, I can copy this entire dialog box and I will paste it inside action 2. There is no action 2 here. Okay, fine. There is no action 2. Similarly, we can delete the objects. Right click and delete, or simply select here and click delete button. That object will be deleted. So these are all other actions that we can do. What we can do? Copy and paste. Copy and paste we can do. And next, cut and paste we can do. Is it? And we can delete objects. We can delete object. Delete object. Okay. Delete object. And other things, right? What else we can do? These are all object related manipulations. Object name modification, cut and paste, copy and paste, and delete. These things we can do. Apart from that, what else we can do? We can modify the object description also. We can modify the object description. In the object description, we can modify property values, or we can add or we can remove properties from the description. We can add new properties into the description by clicking here. See, for example, if I want to remove this property from this description, click this delete button. So that is deleted. If you want to add some other property into the description manually, click this plus button. Then select here what property you want to add into that description. Suppose I want to add this property, click OK. So that is added. So like that, we can modify, we can do these three manipulations. What is it? The first thing is description. In the description, modify description values. Description values. Next, add property to description. Next, remove property from description. From description. So these things we can do. Apart from this, what else we can do? See that if you go here, apart from that, we can highlight an object in the application. See, by using this highlight in application button, or go to object menu and select here, not here, where is highlight tools, where is that highlight option is not displayed, where is it? Highlight view, in the view menu we can see that highlight in application. That means we can highlight the object. See, an object which is added in the repository file is called a test object. Understand? An object which is added in the repository file, that is called a test object. So by using this test object, we can highlight actual object in the application. That is that one. That is another action. What we can do? Highlight actual object in the application for the selected test object. And similarly, we can search, we can find, for example, if that repository contains hundreds of objects in the real-time projects, yes, it is possible. In one repository file, there can be hundreds of objects. So in such case, it is very difficult to find some object in the repository file. So for example, I have this button. Suppose if I go to login, suppose I want to find what is a test object for cancel button. Cancel button test object I want to find in the repository file. Then we can use this option. Go to view, locate in repository, locate in repository. That means it will locate the test object in the repository file for the selected actual object. Test object means an object in the repository file. Actual object means an object in the application. So select this object option and see, I select here cancel, click OK. There is no object in the repository. See that cannot locate this object in the repository file because there is no cancel button available in the repository file. Similarly, select here view and locate in repository. Now if I click password, click OK, see that the control is coming to password text box, test object. The password test object is highlighted in the repository file. So that is another option we can have. What is that? Locate test object in the repository file for selected actual object in the application. Are you clear? So that is another thing. In view, we have highlight in application, locate in repository. That means it will locate the test object in the repository for the selected actual object. Are you clear? Now let me go through these menus, what options we have. In the file menu, export local objects. See that export local objects. This option we can use to export all local repository objects into shared object repository file. That we'll see in the next topic. That means creating a shared object repository file from the local repository file. Then we can use this option, export local objects into shared repository file. And this is same thing, export and replace local objects. That means if there is any duplicate objects available in the shared repository file, it will replace those objects. That is this option. And next, come to edit. These are all normal editing options. In object, define new test object. What is this in define new test object? To add a new object to repository file manually. That means by defining object description and object name manually, we can add object to repository file even though application is not available. In that case, we use this option. And to add object to local, this we can use to add objects automatically into the repository one by one. And update from application. What is this one? What it will do? We can update object description from the application. That is this option. By using this option, we can it recaptures object descriptions from the application for the selected object. Are you clear? See, for example, I want to recapture this agent name properties. You can click this button, update from application, or you can choose this option, update from the application, and select that application object. 1 second. Keep it open. Now click this button, update from application. Now select here agent name. So it will recapture this description. It recaptures the description from the application by using this option. When we use this option, if there is any changes in the application properties, object properties, then we have to update that properties in the repository file. Is it right? For example, attached text is modified in the repository file. Then you have to update this value. How you can update this value? You can modify this value manually, or we can use this option, update from application option. So it will automatically update that all the properties in the description with the latest values. That is called update from application. Are you clear? And view, highlight in application and locate in the repository file. Compact view means it won't display right side description. See, compact view. This is the compact view. Full view. It will display description panel. Description panel will be displayed and description panel will be hidden if you select compact view. And come to the tools. Object Spy. From here also we can open the Object Spy tool and associate repositories. For example, when we use this associate repositories option, see, with this action 1, what objects are displayed here currently? Action 1 local repository objects are displayed. Suppose if you want to add any shared object repository to this action 1, then we can use this option that we will see in the next topic, associate repositories. That means to associate shared object repositories with action to action, we use this option. Are you clear? So these are all various options are available in object repository tool. Okay, so that is about local repository file and object repository tool. Now come to the second type of object repository, that is called shared object repository file. What is a shared object repository file? Shared object repository. What is the meaning of a shared object repository? The shared object repository, the name itself denotes what is a shared object repository. Just look at that slide. How local repositories are associated with actions using one-to-one relation. For every action, there is separate local repository. For action 1, there is one local repository. For action 2, there is one local repository. For action 3, there is separately one repository. So with every action, there is one local repository associated. Any action cannot have multiple local repositories. There should be only one local repository for every action. Understand? But when you come to shared repository file, this local repository file can be used only by one action. This local repository will be used only in one action. This local repository can be used only in one action. So that's why it is one-to-one relation. But when you come to shared repository file, the shared repository file can be used in more than one action. That means the shared repository file can be shared by multiple actions. That is called shared repository file. The repository file which can be shared by multiple actions. That is called shared object repository file. So like this, it is a shared repository 1, shared repository file 2, shared repository file 3. Suppose if I have created 3 shared repository files, with action 1, I have added 2 shared repository files. With action 2, I have added these 2 shared repository files. With action 3, I have added 3 shared repository files. Look at that. All 3 repositories are associated with action 3. With action 2, this one and this one. That means repository 1 and repository 3 are associated with action 2. And action repository 2 also associated. Understand? That means one shared repository file can be shared or can be associated with multiple actions. Similarly, one action can be associated with multiple shared object repositories. What is this relation is called? Many to many. Many to many relation. That means with one action we can associate multiple shared repositories. Similarly, one shared repository file can be associated with multiple actions. Understand? That is called shared repository files. So what is the definition of shared repository file? The repository file can be shared by multiple actions. That is called shared object repository file. Okay, one action can be associated with multiple shared object repositories. It is possible. Are you clear? One shared repository file can be shared by multiple actions, or similarly one action can be associated with multiple shared repositories. So the relation between shared repository and action is many to many. Are you clear? Understand? Now, where we can create this shared object repository file? How to create this shared object repository file? The shared repository file can be created using object repository manager tool. Local repository, where we can view and edit the local repository using object repository tool, and this is different. Object repository manager tool. So let us see that. Object repository manager. I'm going to new script. Open a new script. See, now go to resources and select here object repository manager. There is a object repository manager. So this is object repository manager. It looks like same as object repository tool. Both are same except very few options are different. It looks like same as object repository tool. Now in this object repository tool we can create a new shared object repository file, and we have to save it. We have to create and we have to save it explicitly. We have to save that file. Shared repository file should be saved explicitly. It will not be saved automatically like a local repository file. Shared repository file should be saved explicitly. Are you clear? It will not be automatically saved. See now how to add objects to shared repository file. See, for example, I'm saving this repository file. Click save button. I'm saving it. Let me create one folder in D drive. training UFT. Here test scripts is folder is there already. VBS folder is there already. Now I'm creating one more folder, repositories, to save all object repositories, shared object repositories. Inside that I'm saving flight is the repository name. Look at that extension of shared object repository file. .tsr is the extension of shared object repository file. That file name I'm giving as flight and save it. Done. Look at that file name. It is displaying here. Flight.tsr file. Now currently that file is empty. There is no object in that repository file. Is it right? We can add objects to local to shared repository file. How we can add objects to shared repository file? We have here three options. How to add objects to local repository? We have multiple options here to add objects to local repository. Is it right? What are those options? We have seen already. There are four options to add objects to local repository. But here we have only three options to add objects to local repository. We have three options. The first one is add object. Add object. That means this one. Open this. Open the object repository manager and application. Both keep open and click this add object button and select the object. What object you want to add? Agent name. So it is added. Similarly, click on password text box. So select that one. Next one, click OK button. Add it. And click cancel button. Add it. Are you clear? After adding that, just please rename it as per the guidelines. DLG and cancel is a button. BTN. Okay. OK button. And agent name. It is a text box txt, and remove the blank space and if any special character in that. Txt password. Done. Now save that repository file. Done. The object repository file is created. Flight.tsr file is created. Now this shared repository file is not associated with any action by default, but local repository will be associated by default with some action. Is it right? But shared repository file will not be associated with any action by default. Are you clear? That is one important point. Shared repository file will not be associated with any action by default. Are you clear? So we have created shared object repository file and we are saving that in some location in my system. D drive training UFT repositories folder. I saved this repository file with the name flight.tsr file. Now what we should do to use this shared repository file objects in our action 1 or inside QTP action, what we should do next step, we should have to associate this shared repository file with the QTP action. That should be the next action, next step that we have to do. Okay, that we'll see later how to associate. So this is one way of adding the objects to shared object repository by clicking add object button. What are the other two options? Other option is manually. We can add objects manually by using go to object, define new test object option. This option is available in local repository as well. Click this button and select what type of object you want to add. For example, I want to add button and I want to add a cancel button or help button, help button, and text is help. I'm defining the description manually. Native classes win button, native classes button. So with this description and with this name, I am adding object to repository file. See that it is added. Look at that. This help is added inside cancel because this cancel button was selected at the time of adding that object. That's why this help is added inside this cancel. But this help should be added inside login dialog. So I can move that one. Drag and drop. Or cut and paste we can do. Cut and paste also we can do. It is a button. So like this, we can add objects manually. And the third option, we can export from local repository. We can export objects into shared repository file from local repository. It is possible. Are you clear? We can export objects into shared repository file from the local repository. So in the here we have seen that option in the object repository. Sorry, in object repository we have seen that option. Okay. So this is the object repository, right? Here we can find file export. See, it is not displayed now because there is no objects here. If there any objects are available in the local repository, then these options will be enabled. Just simply by clicking this option, you can define into which repository you want to export this, into which shared repository file you want to export that. So automatically it will create a new shared object repository file with these objects. That is that option. Are you clear? So by exporting local repository objects, we can create shared repository file. We can add objects into shared repository file from the local repository by using export option. Using object repository tool. Using object repository tool, not by using object repository manager. Repository tool. Are you clear? So these are the different options that we can use in object repository manager to add objects to shared repository file. Next one, what else we can do? Associating, associate shared repository to action. It is important step. After creating the shared repository file, if you want to use shared repository file objects inside QTP action, that repository file, that shared repository file should be associated to that action. So it is very important step. Associating shared repository file to action. See how to associate that. For example, I want to use this shared repository file objects in this action 1. Now we can't use it because no way this repository file is associated with this action 1, because this shared repository file is not a local repository to automatically associate it with this action 1. It is a shared repository file and it will not be associated with any action by default. So if you want to use objects from this shared repository file in this action 1 or in action 2 or in action 3, in any action, if you want to use any shared repository file objects, that shared repository file should be associated to that action. How to associate that? Let us see that. There are two ways to associate. You can go to resources and select associate repositories option, or go to object repository tool and select here action 1 and then select here associate repositories. Both are same. Either you can select this option associate repositories option inside object repository tool under tools menu, or you can select directly in the resources menu associate repositories. Both options are same. Select this option. Now it opens associate repositories window. Here select the repository, select the shared repository file, which one you want to associate. This repository file I want to associate. That file is displayed here. Now in the left side drop list box, it displays the list of available actions in the current QTP script. There is only one action, so that action name is listed here. So which action you want to associate? This repository file. We want to associate this repository file to this action 1. So just simply select that action 1 and move that to right side. So this action is associated with this repository file now. That's what you have to do. Click OK. That's all. Now open object repository tool. Look at that. Objects are displayed inside action 1. What does this means? These objects are added to local repository? No. These objects are not added to local repository. These are the objects associated with this action 1 from shared object repository file. See, look at that here. There is one filter in the right side drop down. Filter. What option is selected by default? All objects. Now select here local objects. That means it displays action1 local repository objects. It displays local repository objects now. It is empty. There is no object in the action1 local repository file. That's why it is empty. See, to this action1, we have already associated flight.tsr file. That file name will be listed here. So select this file. See that. These are the objects associated to this action1 from this flight.tsr shared object repository file. See, these are all shared object repository file objects. These are all shared repository file objects, not local repository objects. These are all shared repository objects. That's why all these objects are in disable mode. If it is a local repository objects, those objects will be displayed in enable mode. Since these objects are not in local repository and these objects are associated with this action1 from shared repository file flight.tsr, that's why these objects are displayed here in disable mode. That means we cannot modify these objects in this object repository tool. In the object repository tool, it is not possible to modify shared repository objects. Only local repository objects can be modified in object repository tool. Where you can modify shared repository objects? We can modify shared repository objects only inside object repository manager tool. Suppose if you want to modify any of these objects in the shared repository file, what I should do? For example, there is a btn help button is there. Now I will open object repository manager. So this is the file. That file is already opened here, flight.tsr. See, I will remove this help button now from this repository file. I removed it. Okay. Save it. I saved that one. I saved it. Now come and see that here help button is deleted here automatically in the object repository tool, because the changes whatever you make in the object repository manager, that will be automatically reflected here. But you cannot do any changes in the object repository tool for these shared repository objects. All shared repository objects will be displayed in disable mode in object repository tool. We cannot modify shared repository objects. All of you clear, guys? Object repository association. From where we can do that? Go to resources, associate repositories. Here we can do that one. After association, then we can use these objects in the script. Now let us see that how to create a script without recording. If you want to create a script without recording, okay, before going to the script creation, let us discuss about the benefits and the disadvantages of shared repository files. Benefits. What benefits? What are the benefits we can say? There will be no duplicate objects because same shared repository file can be used across the actions in multiple actions. Is it right? So no need to create any duplicate objects. So the shared repository file can be used in multiple actions. No duplicate objects will be created. No duplicate objects will be created here. So what is the benefit from that? The maintenance of shared repository files is very easy. Objects maintenance is very easy. How it is easy? Maintenance is easy. How it is easy? Because see, for example, I can associate, see, for example, for login dialog box, I created one repository file for login dialog box. Understand? So wherever I want to run login screen, whatever the action it is, in which action I want to run login action, login screen, I can add this repository file to that action. We no need to create any more duplicate object in other repository file. We no need to create one more repository file to run login screen from any action. Only one repository file will be created for login screen, and the same repository file will be added to all actions wherever you want to run login screen. Understand? I can create now 10 actions which is running login screen by using one repository file, not by using 10 local repository files. Suppose if you are using local repositories concept, how it is? Suppose if I have 10 actions which are running login screen, then definitely you should add all these objects in 10 local repositories. That is the case. But when you are using shared repository file, we are creating here only one shared repository file, and that same file will be used in all 10 actions. We are not creating here 10 different repository files like in local repository file. So there is no duplicate of objects in the shared repository file. And suppose tomorrow, if there is any changes in the local login screen, how many repositories we have to modify? Only one repository file we have to modify, because we are creating one repository file for one screen. If there is any changes in that screen, then definitely we have to modify only one repository file, not more than one repository file. So that's why objects maintenance is very easy by using shared object repository file. So in the real-time projects, we always use shared object repositories, not local repositories. All of you clear about the benefits? And what are all the disadvantages? Advantages. See, just right, you should be familiar with shared repositories. So that means we have to create a repository file separately, and we have to save it, and we have to associate that. Only then we can use shared repository file. Is it right? But if you are using local repository file, it will be automatically created, and it will be automatically saved, and it will be automatically associated. You have to do nothing if it is a local repository. That means somewhat it is the maintenance, not maintenance, we can say what it is, association. Sometimes you may get, suppose if the repository file is not associated, and if you run the script without associating the shared repository file, it will fail. So association is the one difficult headache. Associating shared repositories with action is one headache process. Sometimes there might be a chance to missing. Without association, you might be running the script, and so you will be getting failures. Action is something action should be taken carefully. Otherwise your script will not be running. That is the only thing, is the main disadvantage using shared repository files. That means for learners to work with shared repository file, it might be difficult. For beginners who are learning newly, they might prefer to use local repository. But in the real-time projects, always we use shared object repository. Are you clear? Now let us see creating a script using shared object repository. Create a script, QTP test script using shared repository file. What steps are involved here? Let us say that. See, whenever we are always right automating the test cases in the application. So before automation, definitely test case should be available, and the test case should be already executed manually, and the test case should be already passed. Only then you will be automating the test case. Otherwise we don't take the test case for automation. Is it right? That means before creating the automation script, definitely the test case should be available, and the test case should be already executed and passed. So the first step what we should do to start automating to develop any automation script, what is the first step you have to do? Understand the test flow, understand the test case flow. Are you clear? And identify reusable steps, reusable steps in that test case. Identify objects, all objects that we will be using in that test case execution, all objects and reusable steps. This is the step one. First, we have to understand the test case flow and identify all objects which are required to run the test case, and identify if there is any reusable steps. That means if any steps can be reused in another test case, those reusable steps can be identified. Now, second step, what we should do, create shared repository file and add all required objects to repository. Are you clear? Now, second step, we will be creating shared object repository file and add all the objects in the application one by one. See that, for example, like this, we already done that one. We created flight.tsr repository file, and after that we added all the objects what we need to run login test case flow. Those objects are added one by one into the repository file, and we saved it. And next step, associate shared repository to QTP action. So that also we already done. So we already associated flight.tsr with action 1. Is it right? Already associated here. From resources, associate repositories option. By using this option, we already associated. That is done. So next step, create a simple script or normal script by drag and drop objects from the repository file into test panel. What we have to do next? To create a script. Create a simple script by drag and drop objects from the repository file into the test panel. So it is very easy to create a script. Look at that here. Just keep open QTP script and keep open your object repository file, whatever you want to use, either in repository manager or in object repository tool. Anything is okay, fine. We can use either object repository tool or in object repository manager. Keep open that repository file. Now, what is your first step in automating login test case? See, actually, before starting this automation script creation, you can write all the steps in the test panel. What steps should be automated? See how we are creating the script. What steps should be automated? See, first we have to add a description. See that I'm adding here how to create real-time script. First add description. Test name. What is the test name? Then add description about the test case. Then define here if there is any input parameters or output parameters that we are using, or if there is any repositories that we are using. In this script we are using only repositories. I am not using any input and output parameters, so I am not defining that. I am defining repositories. What repository is required to run the script? Next, history. History means what is the name, author name, and on which date it is created, and what is the task he has done on the script. So like this, see, for example, let me take the script name is this one, TC001 TC001 test case 1, or simply FR flight reservation 001 first test case, valid login, valid login. That is a test case name. That is a script name, QTP script name. The description, test valid login functionality. And a repository file. What repository file where you have to use? Flight.tsr. And what is the name of the author? Or Prasad. And date of creation. Give that 7 November 15. And what is the task? It is initial creation. Initial creation. So like this, we have to add first description. QTP test description should be added. After that, add your variable declarations, if any, here. And after that, add your steps, test case steps. What is the test case steps? What is the first step? Launch flight application. That is the first step you have to automate. And second step, enter agent name, password, and click OK button. These are the steps we have to automate next. Next, what we have to do? Verify flight application is open. Flight application is open. And see, after launching the application, I want to verify login dialog is displayed. See, these are all the steps involved in the test case. So this test case, right, contains a few verifications and a few input steps are there. So like this, you should add all the comments first. Add comments. What steps should be automated? All those steps should be defined as comments in our QTP script first. After that, now you can drag and drop objects. See, what is our first step? Maybe launching application. That step we have to write manually. We cannot drag and drop this step, first step. But this step also we cannot drag and drop. Verify login dialog is displayed. We have to write a code for that. What we can drag and drop? All input steps can be drag and drop. See, enter agent name, password, and OK button. So these three steps can be generated by dragging and dropping the objects from repository file into test panel. What is the first field? Agent name. So select here agent name, text box, and drag and drop that here. See, automatically it will generate the code for that field. Similarly, next one, what is the next field? Password. Select the password text box and drag and drop that one here. So for that password field, automatically it generates the code. And what is the next field? OK button. Drag and drop that OK button here. Done. So these three steps are done. Are you clear? After creating the normal script, understand what is the next step we have to do here? Enhance the script. Enhance the script. We have to do enhancement. We have to modify the script to complete that script creation. After that, do dry run. We have to execute that script, dry run the script. Dry run and modify. If any issues are there, we have to fix those issues. Dry run and modify. Are you clear? And finally, this is the steps involved. These are the steps involved. Dry run and modify. That's it. So now, what kind of enhancement you have to do after dragging and dropping? See here, objects are right. Then we have to check that for each step, what is the first step? Enter agent name. The method is set. See that the set method will be automatically displayed here. Simply click the type the dot after close bracket. Type dot here. It will display list of methods which are available for that text box. So set is the method to enter the text into the text box. So set should be selected. So by default set is displayed. So no problem. You no need to modify that method. And see, for this set method, after selecting the method, just simply type blank space. Type blank space. Then it will display inputs. What input should be passed to that set method? There is one input I have to pass. What is that input? Text. What value should be entered into that agent name? So that should be passed as a text. That means as a string. So string should be enclosed always with double quotes. Write in double quotes the value. This value I want to enter into that agent name. Similarly, password dot set. What value you want to set? Mercury is the password I want to enter. Then click. For click, is there any input is required? All inputs are optional. Look at that. There are 3 inputs for click method, but all are optional. So nothing to enter, not mandatory. So we can ignore that. That's it. So this is a normal script we created now. Understand? Now save this script. I'm saving this script now. Inside this test scripts folder, already there is a for login. Inside the same script, no, I will give same test case name. What is the name I have defined inside this description? fr001 fr001 underscore valid login. This is the script name, valid login. Save it. Done. So that is the same name I have given to the script as well. Are you clear? So this is the way how we should create a real-time automation script in the project, in the real-time projects as well. In the real-time project also we follow the same process. First you have to define the description, then add the comments for all the steps what should be automated, and then create a simple script by drag and drop the objects one by one for all inputs. For all input steps we can drag and drop the objects one by one in the order how you want to execute, and then modify the methods and enter the input. Okay, after that now complete. See, the script creation is not yet completed. Okay, so still there are many more steps you have to add to this. What is the first step? Launch the application. When you can run these 3 steps, first step should be executed. This is the first step, launch the application. After that we have to verify login dialog box is displayed or not. If it is displayed, then we have to run this. If the login dialog box is not displayed, we cannot run these 3 steps. Is it right? So there are a lot of still we have to add few more steps to complete this script development for this login test case. So now let me write first step, launching the application. How to launch any Windows application? So the statement for that is invoke application is the command. Invoke application and give that application exe file path for Windows applications. For this application, here this is the application icon. Right click on this icon, go to properties. This is the address. It is a path of exe file for this application. Copy this in from the target text box, copy that value and paste that value here simply. That's it. That is the application path. I want to invoke that application. After invoking, actually we have to verify. We will see this step later, how to do automation of verifications. At the time we will cover this step. After verification, we have to execute these 3 steps. Again there is a verification. So now I am ignoring the verification steps at this moment. We are not covering these verifications. Just we covered only normal input steps. We automated and save the script. That's it. The scripting is done. Now let me run this script. Now let me run the script and see that is it running or not. See, I have closed all login dialog boxes. Now run. So it opens login dialog box, but why it is throwing error? Okay, password is incorrect. Cancel that. What value I have entered? Spelling is wrong. Mercury. Mercury. Is it right? Now it is right? Okay. Now run this. So it should launch login dialog box and it should enter Prasad and Mercury values in agent name and password fields and clicks OK button. Okay, application is open and all the steps are executed here. We can see in the result file one by one. First step, enter agent name and second step, enter password and click OK button. See, now if you want to capture the snapshot of every step that QTP is running, we can capture the snapshots as well. To capture the snapshots in the result file, you can go to tools, options, snapshot, screen capture, under run. I want to capture snapshots always. Select here always. Now it will capture snapshot for every step that QTP is running. Now see that. Now look at that in the result file. You can see snapshots now for every step. It is entering the value here, and password. It is entering the value here. This value is entering in this text box. Click OK. Are you clear? So you can capture the snapshots by selecting this option. Where is that option? Tools, options, run, screen capture. So it is not a good idea to select always option, because sometimes it is required to capture the snapshot of every step. What is the problem? If you capture snapshot for every step, that result file size will be increased unnecessarily. Okay. So we can capture always only for errors. If any error occurs, only then I want to take a snapshot. Otherwise, I don't want. Generally, this is the option will be selected. And if you want to capture snapshot for every step, you can select it by choosing this option always. Not only snapshots, we can also do recording. The entire script execution should be recorded as a video file. Can be recorded as a video file, and it will be saved in the result file. That video file will be saved in the result file, and we can play back that video file from the result file itself. Now let us say that always I want to capture the snapshots. Yes, I want to capture snapshots every time. Okay, apply. Now let me run this now. Done. Now look at the result file. We are capturing snapshots also, and also video file also. We captured everything. See that video file, you can see here, screen recorder. There is an tab here, screen recorder. Go there. Simply click this button, play button. You can see the entire script execution. You can see. It is over. Again run. See, it is running very fast. Done. Are you clear? So it will show the entire process, what script executed, what steps are executed in the application. So the entire execution will be recorded as a video file, and it will be saved in the result file. Okay, that option is available in QTP, but we don't use these two options until unless it is required, because unnecessarily it will occupy more space. Because of that, we don't use this in real-time projects also. But sometimes in some projects, if the client provide more space, then we will be using this also. Okay, otherwise unselect this checkbox, movie checkbox, and here also we can choose always. It can be captured, no problem. Done. Okay guys, clear how to create a simple script we have seen today by using shared object repository file. Hello, Shiva Subbarao Chari, any doubts? Okay, any doubts here? Okay, if you don't have any doubts, right, just write I want you to do some practice. Maybe try with same flight resolution application. Maybe whenever you have, if you have installed in your machine UFT 12, then you can try with web application also. If you don't have UFT 12 and if you have only QTP 10 or 11, then you can try with this Windows application. Okay, see, if it is a Windows application, I want you to create same kind of a script for inserting new order in this application. After this flight reservation window is open, I want to automate the following steps. What steps I want to automate? Just I will show you that. First, click this new order button in the application. That is the first step, and enter data flight. The data flight value should be MMDDYY format. MMDDYY format. Future date we have to enter, and fly from. Select fly to, and click this flights button, and select one flight, either first flight or second flight, whatever the flight from this list. Click OK. Enter passenger name, customer name, enter number of tickets 5, and select the class, any class, first class, business class or economy class, and click insert order button. These are the steps I want to automate. Just please follow the same process what I have done here now to create the script. You create the same shared repository file with all these objects, then associate with to new QTP action, then drag and drop. First add comments, description, comments, and then drag and drop objects one by one. Then modify the methods and enter the input wherever is required. Are you clear? Can you try? Can you try to automate this inserting new order functionality, inserting a new order for flight tickets? We are booking the flight tickets. For that we are placing new order for flight tickets. That is that functionality. Okay, just you can try this and then you can continue tomorrow with the next topic. So today we discussed a very sure Shiva, we'll look into that. Today we discussed a very important concept, that is object repository concept. We discussed about object repository, what is object repository, and how many types of object repositories are there, and what is a local repository. In detail we discussed about local repository, okay, and how to create and how to save and how to view and edit that local repository, and how to add objects to local repository file, and what are the benefits and disadvantages, and what are the different actions operations that we can execute in object repository tool. Okay, those things and all we have seen today. And next one, we discussed about shared repository file. It is very important concept, shared object repository file. What is a shared repository file, how to create that, and how to add objects, how to associate, and benefits and disadvantages. Okay, and also we have seen today the process of creating new QTP script using shared repository file. How to create a new QTP script using shared repository file. First we have to understand the test case flow and identify all objects and reusable steps, and create a shared repository file and associate that repository file to QTP action. Then create a simple script by drag and drop objects from the repository file into the test panel and enhance the script. Enhancement means there are a lot of things that we have to do after creating a normal script. Okay, that and all we will do. That is what we have to learn. After drag and drop the objects, that is simple. After drag and drop the objects, then what else we have to do to complete the automation script creation? This is what we will be learning in all our next classes. Enhancements. What are the enhancements we have to do to QTP script? Those concepts will be learning in all next sessions. Then dry run. Do some dry run of the script. What we created, is it running or not, or is there any issues? And if there is any issues, fix those issues and run again. And this is the process that what we should have to follow even in real-time project to create a QTP script. Okay, just you guys prepare one small QTP script for this functionality, insert a new order functionality. What steps I'm repeating again? Click new button, enter data flight, fly from, fly to, click this flight button and select the flight, enter the passenger name, enter number of tickets, class, and click insert order button. That's all. These are the steps I want you to automate. Simple, very simple script, similar script I want to create. See, you no need to create a login and you no need to invoke the application, because when you will be running this new order, inserting new order, once application is logged in and once this window is opened, then you will be running that script. So you no need to automate or you no need to recreate this login script. Forget about login script. Open a new QTP script and just simply directly automate starting from this step. Click new order button. From this step, you have to start automation. You should not start automation starting from the login. Login is separate test case. After running login test case, you will be running this test case. Understand? So login should be separate script and creating new order should be separate script. In the creation of new order, you no need to include login here. Understand? So in this script, you should not add login flow. Okay. So you have any queries and doubts, guys, in today's session? So all of you know, please practice that whatever we are discussing, maybe a VB script or anything. If you have any doubts in even in old concepts, what we already discussed in our previous sessions concepts, if you have any doubts, maybe you might be practicing now the old sessions also. So if you get any doubts in old sessions, what we already covered, please let me know. No problem. We will I can clarify, and if required I can explain once again the old concepts what we have already discussed, and if you have any doubts now. Okay, in any session you can ask me any topic, not only today's session topics, even old session topics also. If you have any doubts you can raise. Okay, Chari and Subara, if you don't have any doubts we can drop off and we can join tomorrow.